Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Ingrid Dahl, who is joining me from Sausalito, California. Ingrid is an accomplished author, speaker, and leadership coach with more than 20 years of experience guiding leaders across diverse fields, from corporate and media to nonprofit and social justice organizations. Ingrid holds certifications from both the International Coaching Federation and the Center for Creative Leadership, and her global influence extends into academia and advocacy as a lecturer and advisory board member for Rutgers University's Institute for Women's Leadership, a TEDx speaker, and founding member of Brooklyn's Willie Mae Rock Camp. Ingrid continues to champion leadership, creativity, and empowerment across diverse communities. A lifelong champion of underrepresented voices, Ingrid has written, filmed, and directed short works that delve into themes of identity and representation, amplifying stories often left unheard. And beyond her work in media, she has toured with multiple rock bands, mastering bass, guitar, drums, and vocals. And as a former violinist, I think that is fabulous. Ingrid's latest book is both an intimate memoir and a universal call to embrace what we most need in today's world: shared humanity, truth, forgiveness, and love. Sun Shining on Morning Snow, a memoir of identity, loss, and living boldly, was written in the wake of her mother's passing. It bridges grief and healing while offering profound reflections for anyone navigating identity, loss, and the courageous choice to live authentically, even when that means challenging the expectations imposed by family or society. I'm looking forward to talking with Ingrid about her parents' remarkable love story, one that boldly challenged societal norms, and her own experience growing up in an interracial family. We'll reflect on the profound journey of healing generational trauma she shared with her mother, as well as the deeply spiritual bond that carried them through her mother's transition to the other side. We'll also explore Ingrid's path of rebirth and how writing her memoir, Sun Shining on Morning Snow, became both a vessel for grief and a catalyst for transformation. This powerful interview, this powerful conversation, will surely expand our empathy, deepen our awareness, ignite curiosity, and inspire us to embrace our most authentic selves in a world that so often insists on telling us who we should be. I can totally relate. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Ingrid. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Hi, Irene. What a joy and a gift to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. And likewise, I think that this is going to just be very special. I mean, you sing my tune, all the things that you're doing and you believe in. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to love interviewing this lady. So let's start, because your parents had a remarkable love story and they broke a lot of rules in their day. So tell them about them. And I was so impressed by their accomplishments and how they define societal norms.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Growing up, I remember these moments where strangers would ask my father rather bluntly if, he was in the army, because they were curious, I suppose, as to why he was married to a woman who was Asian. And when I was born, it was 13 years after interracial marriage was legalized in the United States. So, maybe a year or two before then, is when they meet at Rutgers University, all the way on the East Coast. I think for my mom, who was from Taipei, Taiwan, it was the farthest place she could go to experience something really different. She was a graduate student. She didn't come here for undergrad. She was one of the top of her class back in Taiwan. And what's fascinating is my mom, as a graduate student, had kind of reluctantly chosen to go on a double date with her roommate. Her roommate's date was my father. He was an undergraduate student who was studying science, but also loved to dance. He loved theater. He had a whole background in, drama, which is so different, where my mother's studying computer science and artificial intelligence back in the late 70s.
Wow, she was ahead of her time.
Very. My mother was a tech pioneer and a fashionista and was just like the life of the party.
Wow.
And she had a sassy streak because my father's looking at this poem on the wall in Chinese characters, and he's like, wow, that's beautiful. He asks if she could translate it. She does. And my father's like, oh my goodness, like, who wrote that? And she said, I did. Like, you're like, a dumbass or something. But my dad was really struck with the depth and probably some sort of spiritual soul connection with my mom. And neither of them, when they started realizing that they're like soulmates, which was on a long walk, long after their dates had left, their other dates had left, I think it was a powerful strike of, you are the person who I want to spend every path with. It didn't matter what their race was or their age difference or even their socioeconomic differences. What I think is amazing about my parents, they boldly chose each other when their families were really against their interests, their love, their union. My father was called a white barbarian
Ooh.
by my mother's family. I think my dad's mother was, a bit racist. And so she was like very uncomfortable with the idea. And they also had society. They were being looked at all the time with so many stereotypes at them. You can
People
imagine
must have stared at them all the time.
they stared at them all the time. They were very beautiful in their own respects. And they were very happy. And I think people who see that boldness and that joy want to taint it because why don't they have it, right? So I watched a lot of trials and tribulations with my parents, and I still am amazed that despite all of this journey, they were partners through it all, up until, her parting
But
death.
they still are.
Yes, that's right.
They still are, and they're together. So, has your father passed also?
He hasn't. He's in New Jersey, and I think he's still very much in his experience with grief and very much still in love with my mom. But tapping into that soul connection, I think, is part of his journey.
Yeah, he's going to love this interview when he hears we're going to. Hi, Dad.
Yeah, hi, Dad. Hi, Bob.
So, what was it like for you? So, you're growing up in an interracial family. If they're staring at your mother and father, they must be staring at you and making you feel like you're an outsider all the time, I
All
would
the
think.
time. Oh my goodness. Before I even recognized that I look different, people let me know. Kid at, like
Kids can be so cruel.
yeah, the bus stop, but it was fascinating. Like in a bus stop scene in my book, in my story, he calls me a half piece of shit. And I don't totally understand. I know that's a bad word, but I don't really understand the meaning behind it. And I slow it down. So these are moments where I think what we can learn is if you go back, and a book is great for that, you have to go back and you really sit with this younger 4 or 5 year old self in memory, and your older self is there kind of like supporting you in slowing down, like what is happening. And I start seeing that this little kid's eyes in this moment of like a hateful statement, I'm really looking at this kid's face and I'm seeing the contortions of what might be said or felt at home around his family. Looking around at the neighborhood that was very kind of like homogenous and, cookie cutter, and wondering if this was the messenger and everybody else felt this similar way of hate around otherness and difference. So it was really important to feel the impact of that on not just me, but also having empathy for this older boy. Because it happens again in an Asian church. I'm also called that by an Asian teenager. And I'm like, at that point, angry.
The Asian teenager, and that's obnoxious. That's
Yeah.
awful.
The most consistent experience at a young age and on was that every day a stranger, an adult, at least 2 to 3 times a day would ask me, "What are you? What are you?" Not, "Oh, you're a cute kid. What's your name?" Or, "Hey, blah, blah, blah." No, it was, "What are you?" And it was not
They,
totally a
they, they
question.
objectified you.
Yeah, and it was a demand. I was meant to tell them my ethnic background on the spot. And I explain in my story like how that felt and the moments where I would get so like exhausted from it, or the moments where I'd be sassy back or say something that, prolonged the answer, and watch how people would get so angry, like, "Tell me the way, come on, why don't you understand? What are you, dumb? You can't just tell me that you're half Asian." But I was like, why does this matter so much to you? Why are you getting so upset? And why do I have to give you this? Like, why are you in my space?
Why do I have to justify my
Yeah.
being?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I have to tell you, Ingrid, like there were so many parts of your story I was relating to because I grew up I'm Jewish, more spiritual now, but I'm Jewish. And growing up, I remember being 8 years old, living in a homogenous neighborhood in Florida, and I beat a girl at a game. And she said, "You're nothing but a dirty Jew." And I
Oh,
ran home and I said to my mother, "Why did she call me a dirty Jew? I took a bath last night." I mean,
oh.
I didn't, but I got a lot of that growing up in Florida,
Mm.
where people say now there's so many Jewish people in Florida. When I was there were not. And I like you. I dealt with a
Yeah.
lot of prejudice. So as I was reading your story, I was like, wow, we're different, but we're the same. They're
Yes.
absolutely
Yeah.
the same. So I want to ask you, and this is fascinating to me also. We also have this in common because my mother and I, after my father passed, healed a lot of intergenerational trauma, and so
Mm.
did you with your mom. So tell us about your experience with your mom of healing. I mean, it must have been so. I can't. Did you used to come home and say to your mom, "They're calling me names again, Mom"? Did she?
No, that's the fascinating part. So going back and being curious about like, wait, so did I go home and talk to my parents? I didn't. There's so much that I kind of held or tried to protect them from my experience. I didn't want them to be harmed. So I kind of took this interesting like protector. Um, but my mother, wasn't until when she was actively dying where I shared that with her. I shared actually an even like harsher bullying where I was like locked in a horse stall and put like a hose on me by a bunch of
Oh my
girls.
God.
And my mother, in that moment, we're sitting on her couch in Taipei. It's the first of 2 annual trips I'm able to do through COVID. So it's like quarantine and a lot of applications to even get a visa approved. It's a massively dramatic experience. But in this second to last time I'm seeing my mother, I couldn't understand why I hadn't shared it with her until 40 some years later. And I'm watching her for the first time, like move her body and then just pour out these tears on my behalf. Like, and it was maybe the most energy she had had left in her, but that was like her reaction. I was like, "Oh my gosh, mom, I'm okay. I'm okay. Like it's all right." But it's almost like because I hadn't shared that with my mom, she didn't have the ability to be there with me and for me. And we didn't always talk about her painful journey as like somebody who's always seen as an immigrant, who's always treated differently because of her accent. And my first language was, Chinese, Mandarin. So I also had that like, oh, shifting gears, Chinglish, English, and told I wasn't a good speaker or writer because I had a bilingual talent. My mother, though, going back to that heaving and crying, and this realization that I hadn't shared with her was also deeply important for me to see because I think I assumed I had to be alone. And I could have brought her in, and it was okay. I didn't feel like I had to go back and like regret that. But what was important is when my mom was showing that feeling and evoking this kind of love, I was able to kind of ask her questions like, hey, mom, sometimes when I'm feeling attacked or, I'm perceiving that somebody misunderstands me and I feel like triggered where I'm like not valued or, I have to perform to be considered worthy, like all these things, right? I find myself in a really strange, deep well. That's how it feels, that I'm literally in a deep well and it's very hard to get out of. It can take days to get out of. And I'm curious, like, have you experienced that before? Like, these are questions we could be asking the people we love at any time, but here we are at kind of the last piece of our journey together. And I'm so glad I asked her that because my mom is like listening, which is hard because it takes energy and it's important to listen to understand. And she just looks at me after closing her eyes for a while and says, Bay, because I was called Bao Bay, like little treasure.
Which you are.
Thanks. But this was just like blew my mind. She said, that well is mine. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it always felt kind of big and overwhelming and like old, like ancient. She's like, you inherited that well from me. That's my well. I created that well. I was always in that well. I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like there were like scratches on the stone or something if I was really paying attention to it. And she goes, yeah, and you don't need to be in that well. I'm like, no, I don't think it's about me not being in it. I think it's about me changing it. Maybe for you, it became a refuge. And that's where you were able to escape from the world's pressure, from interracial trauma that you had experienced, from racialized sexism that you experienced your whole life, and in the workplace, not being taken seriously for the tech pioneer that she became. But I think what I need to do, because I don't want a refuge, I think I need to slowly fill it back up with like mud and sand and like allow it to not necessarily be a well. Now, there are moments where I still can feel like I'm back in that.
You get triggered.
I do. But I love that it connects me with my mother to be like, okay, this is a choice not just for me, but it's also for her. And I can like actually bring her, because then I was thinking with her about her mom and her pain and the way it showed up. Could be abusive, it could be cruel, but her deepest pain, which we experienced, my nine eye and I, in a moment where she just like kind of blasted about how she needed to be respected. And she opened up her eyes like she had seen something for the first time. And I watched it and I was like, wow, you do need that, but that could be real now for all of us. Like, we all need to be respected. We all need to feel loved. And maybe we need to open our eyes and see that that's real and true and happening, not something that we are being threatened that we won't have. So it's fascinating to be like, okay, if my nine was kind of the person who bombed out the well space, my mom built the well, I fell into it. It's a way for me to choose, how do I help the entire generation? Not because it's a burden, but because I am able to have the tools to say, this doesn't serve this lineage anymore, and we're going to transition and transform out of it.
I love it. Grief and rebirth and transformation. I love it.
Yeah, you do.
I relate so much, Ingrid, because after my father passed, my mother actually, we discussed our well also, and my mother actually went to counseling, and we actually had a meeting, and we healed a lot of the pain that had gone on. And it was also something that hadn't been discussed through the years, because through the years we were all, in my case, we were all just surviving. I think in your case, you guys were so bright, you went into your head, you were a lot in your headspace, right? as opposed to now with your mom, you're relating heart to heart, and you're really talking about that. So I this leads me to ask to talking to you about your book because sun shining on morning snow, and we'll talk about how you came up with that title, captures this powerful reconciliation with your mother.
Mm.
And you talked about forgiveness and love, and it gave birth to a new chapter of acceptance. May it happen in our world also, please.
Oh, please.
And please. And what does that teach us about the role forgiveness can play in creating a more compassionate world where everyone's truth is valued? It's so interesting because you and I also had parallel experiences with forgiveness and acceptance from things that had gone on. And I tell people all the time, it's important to heal and get to that place. So, what would you like to tell us about that?
I would say my mom and I always had kind of a river between us. You know, it would be religion or, me being half white and speaking better English or enter anything that would separate us. And I'd be trying to shout across the riverbank to her and constantly feel like the riverbank was, maybe coming closer, maybe expanding, which is amazing because my illustrator who designed the cover captured that. I'm going to show you.
Please
So
do.
river that cuts between me and my mom. This is my mom who's
Right,
passed away.
right, right.
But right at the
Yeah,
end, it comes together in our hair.
yeah.
I love this. I love this so much because
Beautiful.
it's so poetic to me. My mother would always say this thing where she's like, "You're loved unconditionally," but it was a lie. I wasn't. It was always conditional. And so things would be said, which you wanted to believe, but in action, it was like, no, this is a bartering system. And things that you do will basically create currency around how I'm perceived or not. So it was like a tricky kind of way to grow up.
Is
My
that how
mom,
she grew up? Was that the message she
I
got?
am sure, I am sure. And I also think she was a bit ignored, even though she was so beautiful and so bright. She always longed for her mother to tell her she was loved and hold her. I watched that too. So she would overdo the hugging with me, which is uncomfortable, but then tell me, like, you know, and show me the things that were conditional, and I didn't know what to trust. So I kept my distance a
You
lot.
got a lot of mixed messages.
I did. It was not a mixed message when I was starting to come out to my mom that, Mom, I'm pretty sure I'm a lesbian, where she was very clear that this was not acceptable to her and that I would be disowned from the family. So it's an important moment in the journey where just there's already these rifts, right? And now my saying, hey, I have a truth. I'm gay. I want you to be part of my life and I want to be truthful because it sounds like you're trying to put a lot of pressure on me to like get married and have a family with a man. And that's not what I want. And I have tried. I have tried to have that world and I can see where that ends up. And it's like me being deeply unhappy. That's not what I want. I can't do that. And I
But
won't.
you're so authentic. It meant that you would have to change your identity
It
in
did.
a
And it was
way.
scary. I had internalized homophobia. My mom
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
help. She was always questioning what did they do that made me gay. I was like, oh my God. I mean, there was plenty of things that were messed up growing up, but nothing made me gay. Um,
Hey, mom, it was in the genes somewhere. Come on, mom.
totally. I have definitely wondered that because of the way that she reacted was so strong. Like it was almost like a reflection of her own, maybe.
Well, in Chinese society and in that whole culture, they don't really accept that, right?
Taiwan's better, but my mom really struggled with it. She like got to a place where when she was diagnosed with cancer and had her initial hysterectomy surgery, I went to visit her. I was engaged to my wife, my now wife at the
Courtney.
time. Yes, Courtney. And I was really excited about it, but also trepidatious because I knew my mom was having a lot of feelings around it. But the climactic moment of my mom, I was so like, whoa, mom, what is this? She used all that anger and hurt and disappointment and all the things that she was going through too in her world, which she didn't communicate, into this like incredible sword to strike me down and said, my being gay caused her cancer.
Oh my
and
God.
caused her to want to commit suicide,
Oh
which
my
was
God.
horrendous. And then it created such a big fissure where my parents didn't come to our wedding. We didn't talk for a while. That was very unusual to not talk. And
Very painful.
it was really painful, but it was also like, look, this is where I'm going. I'd love you to come. I'd love you to be part of my life. That's your choice. I'm moving this way. And you're always welcome. And that's what ended up happening. I think my mom, after a year of us being married, realized it had happened. And her daughter was a lesbian and married to a really amazing human. And she had to choose whether she was willing to let that go, her daughter
And
go.
not see you again and have you completely out of her life.
Yeah, which was her choice, right?
Right, right.
So I don't know what kind of big moment opened up that vortex of like, wait, no, I don't want to choose that. But she chose the other. She chose us. She chose to like go against all these other like big feelings, belief systems. And she came to our Christmas, which we hosted. We were like, absolutely. We hadn't heard from her. We're like, absolutely come. And she gave this beautiful speech, unprompted, where she was like, we were really short sighted and I hope you can forgive us. And before she could really even finish, I ran to her and wrapped her in my
Oh, it
arms.
must have meant so much.
It did. And I was also like, look at this powerful woman being in her truth and saying, no, I'm going to do the harder work because this is like me too. So it's like seeing my mom always be the bold, even though she was a bit broken too, she was choosing to be transformational with me. And I was like, wow, I honor where you are right now. And I always will forgive you and I love you. It doesn't matter. We're here now. We're in this new path. And, my mom, like, there's a bunch of more amazing journeys that we had after that moment that, like, changed everything. And the intergenerational healing work.
Hmm.
My mom was like, flirted with gay men. She wanted to go to Hamburger Mary's, which, was run by drag queens. Like, she was wearing a pride shirt from my wife's, corporate office
You
job.
gave her permission. You opened her up now.
Yeah, it was amazing. My dad too wore a little pride pin. So that's not going to be everybody's journey who might be listening who could be, grappling with sexuality and sharing that with their family, or maybe they have and their families have like said, we need separation. But the possibility exists. Like I was really surprised that that happened. So my mom and I had different tracks of healing. The biggest one was perhaps what I just shared around my sexuality. But the female to female intergenerational lineage really came right towards the end. And she always asked, like, do you want to do some healing work? Because she kind of had healing work from Christianity, which I really didn't like. I really didn't react well to that. But she wanted to be somebody who could give me healing in every stage of my life and every year of my life, and would always ask permission, like, do you want to be healed for this? I don't know if that worked, but it was something I saw that she was aware that you have to go back sometimes and make those decisions that I want to be healed. And I might not know what that means, but I choose. My choice is to do the work to be healed. Let's do that. And I'm amazed that my mom, even without a full, clear blueprint or roadmap, was doing what she could in her late stage cancer to leave us in a good place.
What impresses me the most about the story is that your mother didn't stay stuck in all her old patterns, in her old. I had, and again, we have so many parallels because towards the end of my mother's life, we also healed. My parents didn't speak to me for 23 years. So
Oh,
I have a similar story, and I dealt with judgment and all of that kind of thing.
mm,
And at the end, my mother in her later years started really, in a way, opening to me and what I was doing, and we had a wonderful healing. And
yeah.
what happened, the blessing is, when your mom passed and when my mom passed, we had closure. We didn't
Hmm.
have, right? You didn't have any woulda, coulda, shouldas. And I
No,
didn't have any woulda, coulda, shouldas, which a lot of people, they die with so many regrets,
yeah.
right? So you also had this amazing shared death experience with your mother as she transitioned to the other side, which is so cool. You want to share that with us?
I do, yes. And I do want to just add, I think a lot of that resistance to, oh gosh, I wish I could have or whatever. A lot of it's just like use the time you have with the people you love to ask the real questions, the deeper questions. I find when people are like, oh yeah, I've made this narrative up, or this is what I think the memory or the history is, like the boldness here is to slow down and say, gosh, I had this interpretation of something that happened when I was 5 or 6, or I don't totally remember, but all this information and processing and analysis has occurred. Now it's become real. Check that with your family and the people you love, because everybody's on a journey. And in order to like really connect memory in these moments is through that kind of courageous conversations. So I always try to ask thoughtful questions and really hear the answer, because we've learned not to listen to understand, but to respond.
But I mean,
So,
we're always pushing our point of view and not really
yeah,
listening, letting someone else's experience in.
that's right. So we can, listeners, do this like right after hearing this episode is like call up that person or persons and engage. And you'd be surprised what you find out. Usually we're not, we didn't have all the information.
Right. But what
But
is your advice to someone who is dealing with a family member who is not like your mom or my mom, and they remain fixed and they remain sorry, not going there, forgiveness is not happening, acceptance is not happening, I'm right about everything, I am who I am? What is your advice to somebody who says, listen, I tried, but it's not happening?
yeah, I think it's okay to recognize that sometimes people aren't ready and they're on their own journey, or they're like a prisoner of their own making, and you can't get in and rescue them. They have to do that themselves. They have to realize that they have created the cage that they then go in and lock behind them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, but it's like you can't, that's somebody's journey. So what you can say is, look, I don't know if you're able to hear this. My fear has been this, and my hope is this. I love you. I've been experiencing potential manipulation through your disappointment or through your pain. That's my interpretation. I'd love to know what you think about that. Would you say that's real? What is your experience? Like truly sharing the bold information and wanting to hear what they say.
Yeah, and
No?
that's the hard part
Right.
because of the pain and the feelings to sit on your
Yeah.
keep yourself quiet and really hear that
Yeah.
other point of view also, right?
Yeah. You asked me the question about my mom. So it's fascinating. When my mother passed away, I didn't necessarily have a sense that she had left, because I don't think she did yet. Like she physically in our physical world died, but there was a transition period for her soul or her spirit. And what happened was like throughout her journey, I think in this sort of in between space, or like this, dimension, which I'd love to write about again, like as a prequel kind of thing.
We'll come back and we'll talk about
Okay, I love that.
it.
Things were happening where I was getting information, like, what was it? 5 months later, we were having memorial in the States, because half of
Yeah,
her
you had to go to
body,
both,
yeah,
right?
was in Taipei, and the other half is here. And it wasn't until we'd gathered all the family and kind of did a celebration of life, which is what we called it. The next morning, I woke up with my wife. We're in New Jersey. It's like early November, and there's a sprinkling dust of snow. So you're going to ask me, I think, about the title. The book is my Chinese given name by my mom. Sun Shining on Morning Snow is my name.
How pretty.
Isn't it beautiful? And so I literally wake up seeing the morning snow all speckled on the ground, shining like crystals because it's just being beamed. And I can feel what felt like a phoenix, like an energy swirling around this like home that we were staying in. And like a joy of her spirit, that we had honored her or loved her so much that we wanted to come together and like celebrate her. And I felt the like release of this energy from above us. And ever since then, while she was kind of transitioning into this spiritual dimension, we started having automatic writing experiences. So this would always occur on an airplane. And it hasn't in a while. Like my mom passed, it's going to be 4 years this June. So it hasn't been as prominent as of late, but there was this period where anytime I was on an airplane, which I love watching shows or, movies, it just kind of helps pass the time. And usually most things won't interrupt me. I'm like, I want to watch this. I'm excited to see what's happening. But a big feeling of, oh my God, I need to get a notebook and a pen. I'm turning this off. And I would just write what was a dialogue that would be happening between me and my mom.
You were channeling.
It was amazing. And I've got it all documented. But some of the things that my mom was sharing with me was so beautiful. She would say, because I'd be like, Mom, if this is real, like we're going with that because I'm bold. This is real. And I got it validated by a few, folks. They're like, oh yeah, automatic writing, totally normal, Ingrid. I'm like, okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how is this happening? And she's like, well, you are closer to the membrane in the airplane. It sounds like you're closer to the membrane, and I'm in an area by a lake, and she was describing how pretty it was and serene, and I'm meditating. So because I'm meditating and because you're close and listening, we're able to have this conversation.
Wow.
So she was explaining the conditions.
She's saying she's meditating from the other side.
Yes, and then I'm closer.
That's so
to
amazing.
it. So we're having,
Yes.
yeah, and she was sharing things that I would then bring back to my dad and brother. That was really profound. Things that I wouldn't have known. My father being like, oh my God, that's the date that she had seen that flower that she knew there was this other kind of world and it was messaging to her. So my mom had some powers that she just didn't always know how to focus on. But I was like, wow, that's amazing. So that was her telling him that this was real. And other times my mom would tell me it was hard or painful to connect with me later on. And I would ask her why. And she says, because time, we wouldn't understand the concept of time, she was saying, but it was stretching. It's a lot of stretching. And so trying to communicate in this stretching was painful. So there were things that my mom was going through, quite the process. And then maybe the last sort of series of gifts that were showing up in the physical world for me was a mourning dove would show up and check on me no matter where I was. Wow. For at least 2 years that was happening. And then out of nowhere, so there's two plants that represent my wife's father who passed when she was 21 and my mom, two plants. For her father, it's calla lilies. And for my mom, we planted forget-me-nots when I was 5 by our house. And those two plants have shown up on our property out of nowhere.
Wow.
And so when I asked my mom about that, I was like, Mom, these forget-me-nots show up. Is that you? She goes, it's not that it's me. It's that, and this I think is really important for listeners, love and memory create a sort of quantum entanglement that then can show up in different signifiers of energy. So a plant to just kind of bloom that doesn't exist there is around this kind of energy sprout of this kind of quantum entanglement. And I say kind of because I don't know a lot about it, but memory and love. And so to me, it's the choice to love and forgive, the choice to love you, who you are, and be bold in that, and the memories we make that are deeply meaningful, like showing up and having a real conversation with somebody you love and trying to do intergenerational healing. That memory is powerful. And those two come together, potentially connect us beyond. But it was amazing for her to say, it's not that I have this power to do that. It's because you and I share love and memory in such a way.
It's the energy. That's fabulous. And I would also want to ask you, when you decided to, first of all, I want to know how writing the book helped you on your grief journey. And then the other part was, I know there are two driving forces behind your decision to write your book. So tell us about that process.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the driving forces. 4 months after my mother passed away, I had this kind of real ache of, oh my God, my mom can't tell her story. Like she probably would have written her story and her journey. And it was painful to feel. And I suddenly realized that it was like this like big aha awakening moment where I was like, no, 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 no. What? I can write my story and weave what I knew of my mom and our complicated but also beautiful relationship into this story. And I'm going to write a book. And I wrote the manuscript in 6 months. It was really fast. It was with a writing coach. I was very committed. I sent it to a few hybrid publishers and they all said yes, which is amazing. I've never written a book. It wasn't something I was like, I need to do, but I absolutely had to do this. So it was a driving force for sure, was my mother's death. And it was a driving force to remember that our stories matter. And as queer people of color, people who are misunderstood, people who are on the outside, and also all the people who've experienced these common themes of just being a human, that can't be erased. It has to be captured in some way, kind of like what you're doing with your podcast and your book. You're capturing these important human stories that are meaningful. And that was a catalyst too, that my story is meaningful. It's worth capturing and sharing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you. And I want it to be a gift to humanity to say, wow, I've gotten into this person's shoes and I feel encouraged to choose curiosity, to choose empathy, to choose love and forgiveness. And if more people did that in this world, I think the tides of pain driven, fear based, because fear, when we respond with anger and fear, almost because I'm a coach, almost always underneath it is pain. So unresolved pain
You're
creates,
talking my language, girl.
right? It creates war and misunderstanding, and I need to be in control, which is complete farce. I need to have power. It shows up in this greed and me versus you, and it's so divisive and so painful, and it can create so much murder and so much death, which we see repeated throughout history. So I want this to be a gift. Now, I think you asked me another question about
About grief. How did the writing the book help you get through your grief? Because now we're talking about, I mean, this is so amazing, but you're still grieving your mom. It's only,
I
and now even
know
it's been 4 years, you're
I
still,
am. I will look at my brother and my dad who are having different grief experiences. And me writing this book was so healing, but I had to relive my mom's anticipatory grief of her death and after all the time because you're rewriting, you're editing, you're reading it again, you're rewriting, you're editing. And then I narrated the book. So you're narrating these really tough moments, these painful moments of loss, the moment that you find out your parent is going to die, the moment that they do. And then you have to re-listen to it and fix it, then sometimes relive it again by having to, share it with other people. Like every time I have these kinds of conversations, it's not painful to relive, but it's important to have that in me at all times. Just the other day, I had this moment where I was coming out of the shower and I was like, oh my God, my mom is dead. How is that possible? Like, no. And I started bargaining. So I was in shock, disbelief, and bargaining again. And it kind of came and left. And I was like, whoa. And I called my brother. I was like, you'd never, like, this just happened to me. He's like, oh, yeah, that happened to me yesterday.
wow.
So I think it's important for us to realize, like, grief healing isn't linear. It's like a really interesting roller coaster in a waiting room. And you kind of have to be patient and also buckled in because it comes and goes, and you just got to accept and flow with it and go through and around and with it, and accept that it's going to catch you by surprise, and that's okay.
That's okay. And you can learn and grow from it. I have my own personal theory, which I'm not sure would be
Oh,
backed up by science, but I really think when you love someone and they've been in your life, they're sort of in your cells as they multiply.
mm,
And I think that a lot of grief is how your cells are actually grieving and
yeah.
longing. It's almost like a withdrawal that you're longing for this person. And I want to ask you also, with all of the amazing messages and lessons you teach through your book, what would you hope that readers of Sun Shining on Morning Snow, and I have to tell everyone it's a wonderful book, will do differently after finishing reading the book?
Oh,
What do you think that the what would you like the main takeaways to be as people read it?
you have one life to live, or at least that one life you'll remember. So live it boldly. Make the choices to heal, make the choices to love and forgive. That's not the easy way. It's the harder work, but it's worth it. So live boldly and be who you are in your truth, not in your pain.
It's beautiful. And what was your path? What would you say your path to rebirth completely was? Because here we are. And so it helped you to heal, but now you're really transitioning.
It's amazing. I think for some folks who might, because I coach a lot of people who are in transitions and careers, and I watched my mom being, this powerhouse in her career. I had my moments in my career that were like, wow, I'm in like big tech and blah, blah. But I had a tremendous amount at the same time as my mom was, dying and I was processing that. I also had my career kind of explode on me. And I loved that now when I look back. And I hope readers can understand this because it was almost like a rebirth of an awakening where, hey, Ingrid, you are a lot more than what you've made yourself out to be attached to this company or attached to this title. And it's been seductive. That is not you, all of you. And so you need to kind of tip the scale where the work you do, all these things are part of what you choose to do, but it's not you.
It's not who you are, it's part of what you do.
Right. And that awakening was so important to my rebirth in my 40s, early 40s. Now I'm in my mid 40s. And the allowance, the acceptance of, oh, wow, like anything can happen and it doesn't matter because I'll show up my whole self and I'll experiment. And I think writing a book, it teaches you to be so humble at being a beginner again. And like you're an infant, it doesn't feel good to be like so terrible at something or not knowing like, what is this world? It's so brand new. But then after you get through that like painful and uncomfortable part, you get to this place outside your comfort zone where suddenly it feels like play and discovery and joy is right after that. And I want to encourage people that rebirth comes also from like relinquishing control, that title, that dominance, the, like I'm the breadwinner, or whatever we're put, whatever. I think it's a powerful thing to let go of that and to say, if I were just to be, if I leaned into the things that bring me and others joy, even if that didn't bring me a paycheck, what is that? If I take the risk of putting out my story, knowing I might not ever, break even on it, is it still worth giving the gift to the world? 100%. And
Absolutely.
it's a different lens, right?
Absolutely. I want to ask for people who are listening to and saying, wow, she's dynamite. What type of coaching do you actually do? Is it a grief form of coaching or is it a career coaching or?
I do leadership coaching, career coaching, inclusion coaching, kind of you're in a transition moment of any kind. A lot of people who are like, oh, I've been doing this for 15, 20 years and I don't want to. What do I do? How do I be a beginner? I love that kind of stuff. I've been curious about grief coaching. I don't know enough about it, but I think that might be next because I feel so strong in my uplifted view of how grief is a door. And what you said about in your cells and in your growth, it is a moment where you can also choose to use that awakening because it's a crack. It like cracks open. Do you want it to be a crack open that transforms your life and opens your heart chakra? Or do you want it to do the opposite? And I think my idea of grief coaching as a coach would be to help people arrive at that decision and encourage them to make a choice that might feel scary.
To even give them permission that they can move beyond that. You just defined the importance of healing.
Yeah.
In a way, do you have anything else that you'd like to add about the importance for people to get their acts together and go heal their stuff?
Yeah, it's funny. I also don't think healing's linear, like I was saying about grief. It can be also a waiting room. And, unfortunately, you can be right back on the roller coaster with healing. Just the other day, I got into a big argument with my wife, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not in the well, but I'm seeing a very specific thing, and I can't hear, and I'm probably being kind of harsh, but you're being harsh. So now I'm like upset. And it's to be gentle with ourselves when we're not falling back, we're moving, but it's not linear. So every time I heal and it's profound, it doesn't mean I'm not going to experience pain again, or a pattern comes up or a trigger comes up.
But this time you recognize it.
Yes, I do. And I can say, oh, and I have a lot more empathy for my wife and other people. And I have a reminder like, oh, Ingrid, oh, let's like be curious. You don't know. You think you know. You don't know. Be curious. Listen. And it's a good reminder for any of us to, when we're like feeling righteous, is the moment where I'm like, uh-oh. If I'm feeling righteous, usually I'm going to be wrong. So let's sit down, open up our hearts, open up our minds, and
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
thanks,
And
Irene.
what is the Ingrid tip for finding joy in life?
I'd say, like when I was talking about that bird, the mourning dove, sometimes when you take a walk, it's just a walk. Nature is powerful. Looking up and seeing a different perspective and noticing that a bird is there watching you or a squirrel and just sitting with it and just being curious. Like joy comes in moments that need to be discovered. They might be happening all around you, but you're not tuned in or open to it. So just have a different perspective and see if you tune in nature, even just in nature. Because I do. When I'm around water, I'm all water signs, by the way. For those of you who are like, does that matter? I kind of think so. Get curious about, signs and things. I'm in California. But a lot of things happen around water. When my mom died, I went on a paddleboard, and I can't explain what that was like, but that feeling of being connected and letting go, and you're just here, this one spirit in a physical form on a, paddleboard in this beautiful place where things are living and dying, and that's kind of the harmony of how nature works, and you're part of that. The giving up of that and the love and abundance of, wow, I get to be alive in this. That is a simple way to tap into joy, I think.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Ingrid, as we come to a close, I want to share this glowing testimonial.
Oh, okay.
From Dr. Mary K. Trigg.
Oh, I love her.
Professor Emeritus at Rutgers University. I loved her testimonial. This is so beautiful about your memoir, Sun Shining on Morning Snow. And she says, Sun Shining on Morning Snow is a beautifully told memoir about a daughter's care for and ultimate loss of her mother, as well as a moving depiction of her own journey as a mixed-race woman and warrior, and you certainly are a warrior. Raw, loving, candid, and profound, Dahl's book captures a larger truth about grief and the complex and essential relationships between mothers and daughters. I'm a faithful reader of memoirs, and this is one that is up there with the best. They're so beautiful. Ingrid, your journey reflects a life lived with love, forgiveness, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity, even in the face of societal and familial pressures. You've not only earned deep respect within your community, but now within our grief and rebirth community as well. Same back. Thank you for sharing this eye-opening and heart-opening conversation about love, loss, and the courage it takes to embrace our truest selves in a world that so often tries to define us. From my heart, I wish you abundant. And as I like to say, to be continued.
Yes. It's such an honor to be in the same space with you and share your energy. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.